when they came to the set, they knew what they were doing, to camera operators looking through, looking through instructions to figure out how to do the setting and how to do that thing. So there was a real shift in learning. And when you mentioned just, having to have someone there who's just, that's their sole thing to just kind of keep up with it. Yeah. What do you find are pitfalls or advantages of that change? And owner operators, do people rent cameras, or do they just, do you own one? Is it viable, or is that just going to be?
We own a camera, a Sony A7S. It's a little DSLR camera. It's something that we can run out and shoot something with if we have to, but otherwise we rent everything because everything's changing so fast. We used to buy a camera, but then it would be outdated within 2 years, and the value of it wasn't worth selling it to, and we couldn't afford to get a new one right away. So we've gone to just renting, and again, that's mostly on my business partner, Keith, he's the director of photography for us. He tries to keep up with that. And we rent cameras sometimes, and when we're on set shooting, we find, there's a limitation to this camera that we didn't know. And we're going to have to work around it. Things like moire and patterns on people that this camera just won't get around. Or we've had hard drives fail halfway through the day, and we lost half a day's worth of footage and had to quick backtrack and shoot in reverse to try to get that all back. So there's all these issues that you do run into, having to change that fast and going through camera after camera and not really getting comfortable with one single camera. But it also opens up the ability to use the right camera for every job, and there's a different reason to use one over the other. So that's really cool, and that we can rent them from so many places. There's Brain Cell Camera in town you can rent from, but then there's also online resources. You can just kind of go and have them. You can have them sent somewhere. If we're going to go shoot in another state, we can just have the cameras meet us there. So that's very convenient.
Yeah, I got another thing too. Like you were saying, you're switching out camera bodies frequently and stuff. And one thing that I noticed is that some companies are now producing cameras that have interchangeable sensors. So while the camera itself, typically would outdate in 3 years, if not less now, it seems to be getting exponentially worse and worse as time goes on. But now you can just interchange a sensor to a new, 8K sensor, maybe add a new processor unit. But the more modular camera systems where you can basically use the same body, have the same experience of filming with that camera, can now be updated and keep up to date with all the different, styles of filming.
That was kind of a big red innovation too. That kind of started that. So.
Yep.
See, filmmakers can get really wonky too. Limited to the tech front.
I think what's important in terms of technology, with the opportunities, I'm just interested in the democratization of platforms. The democratization that platforms provide, period. There's two things that are really shifting our economy and the way we think, and that is platforms themselves and then the sharing economy. Those are two things, and I think we can actually take a lesson from culture, right? If there's nothing else that we need to be thinking about or how we need to posture, and that is to be flexible in our thinking, right? And organizations that are flexible in their thinking will do well. Those that don't, won't. People that are flexible in their thinking will do well. Those that don't, won't. And I think when we look at our industry, I read Steve Jobs' biography, and I love what one of the Xerox scientists said. He said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And we are always driving that into our young people, even to my own kids. Create the future. And that's why I don't think that we as West Michigan, if we're all about big films, that's one thing. I think we miss out if we think big. I think let's think smart. Let's think well written. Let's think well shot. And we don't need, and we can have great equipment, but because it's shifting from the pros here that talk about that, I think what we do have going for ourselves is the quality. It's an opportunity to shoot something it's in the idea, right? And we don't have to go and raise lots of capital. I was just watching Roman Esquire Israel, and I mean Denzel's film had, I could tell they got money from Dubai, they got money from China, they got money from his family, and I looked at all of that. And I said, look at the supply chain in that, right? really well as a city is to create ideas, as this guy here is doing, with you don't have a budget, right? But what technology do we have available? What ideas, and just drive that idea all the way with whatever we have, whether it's just handheld cameras, whether it's phones. I think the whole idea is we can do some pretty big things in West Michigan if we make our own rules, right? There's Sony's going to always do that, Comcast is always going to do that, Paramount's always going to do that. So let's create something that we can be unique in and forget the incentives, right? What can we do that will bring people to us as opposed to we're having, please write me a check, forget that. Let's go ahead and do our own thing as a community, right? We've got the equipment, we've got the know-how, we've got great talent. And let's just quit asking for permission and do something that is worth the organizations and the industry come and see what we're doing in West Michigan. And I'm done.
To add on to that too, we also have the platform to
we do.
release
Free,
information with the internet.
Yeah.
So,
Doesn't cost us really much of anything.
Well, filmmaking is about telling stories and communicating information. That's really what it is, and I think that's kind of the heart of what you're saying is that it's about the story. It's about taking it in hand and making it happen. The idea of it being so democratized, in that mission of being able to tell your story, other than the technology impact, how has that enhanced the craft of telling the story? How has the technology really enhanced that piece?
Don't you hate it when you have a thought and then it slips as soon as you start
I almost had it to save that question, so go for it.
Well, for me, it's just the availability of so much technology and so many inexpensive resources now. It's just a grand equalizer for storytellers. And I don't think for me personally, it's not as much of a struggle to go out there and tell a story now. There's so much stuff, again, with my cell phone, I could go out, I could tell a story right now just from sitting here and just being quiet and filming you and editing it right on my phone and adding sound effects, adding music all on my phone, and then posting on the internet seemed like it was a post-apocalyptic evening. I mean, it's so much easier to do. And for Mosaic Mobile, we see it as a grand equalizer because most of our kids, a lot of them don't have resources to get themselves to school or feed themselves, but a majority of them have cell phones or have access to cell phones, and with a simple device in their back pocket, they can tell their stories. They can speak on what's important to them. One of our entries this year, one of our honorable mention, because we just loved it so much, is all of our films had these wonderful stories, and then there was one group from GR Montessori, and they talked about global warming and political issues, all through using sticky notes, cut-out letters that they did themselves, and moving globes that were in a classroom. And it was so powerful because you could see the big issues that were really impacting them in a 2-minute video that they made on their cell phone. So I think with the expanse of great resources in YouTube and all the great apps that you have available now just for your mobile devices is just a great equalizer.
Real quick, and I want to share. Our first 3 years for Mosaic, by the way, it was actually high school, college, and non-professional.
And international.
And international. So we actually, by our third year, it was hilarious because the team didn't know why I was so I was not happy, right? So we had 750 films from 46 countries.
Yeah, and 12 people
in
in
your
the
free.
audience. Yeah.
Right? 12 people in the audience. But the biggest thing was we only had 3 films from Michigan, and that bummed me out.
Yeah.
I'm like, what about our kids around here? Right? I get kids from Rio de Janeiro and Rome and stuff. I'm like, what about Grand Rapids? Rockford, Northview, GRPS, Kent ISD. What about those kids? And we actually broke it. I said, okay, we're going to start over again. Like, what do you mean? Well, I actually think that because the first 2 years, the kids from Interlochen won, which makes sense, right? Well, totally well-heeled, brilliant kids, and they're really skilled, great staff and everything.
One of those kids actually